What if the coming conflict between America and Iran was not just political, but prophetic? What if Africa is watching events foretold long ago, yet failing to read the signs? The Bible warns that wars would increase, nations would rise against nations, and peace would become fragile. Donald Trump's threats toward Iran are not happening in a vacuum. They echo ancient patterns. History and prophecy often move together. When global powers clash, the ripple reaches the most vulnerable regions first. And Africa has seen this pattern before, both in scripture and in reality.
Did you know that Christ warned in Matthew 24 verses 6 to 7 that wars and rumors of wars would mark the last days? He also warned that deception would increase, not clarity. Political leaders speak peace while preparing for conflict. Trump speaks strength, Iran speaks resistance. The world hears stability. But Scripture says these signs are not the end. They are the beginning of sorrows. Africa must understand this. Global wars rarely announce themselves honestly. They disguise destruction as diplomacy.
The Bible repeatedly shows great empires collapsing under pride and overreach. In Daniel 2, world powers rise and fall, each weaker than the one before. America's dominance is not eternal. Scripture never promised it would be. Iran's defiance fits the pattern of nations challenging giants before collapse. Africa often assumes great powers are permanent. Prophecy says otherwise. Empires fall not only by war, but by internal decay. And that leads us to a warning Africa cannot ignore.
Revelation 18 describes the sudden fall of a powerful economic system. Merchants weep, nations panic, trade collapses overnight. This is not ancient poetry. It is economic prophecy. If America attacks Iran, global trade routes shatter, and Africa feels it first. Fuel prices rise. Food imports strain. Currencies weaken. Prophecy shows collapse comes suddenly, not gradually. So the question is Africa preparing or sleeping?
In Isaiah 19, Africa is warned and also promised restoration through wisdom. Africa's future is not to follow blindly, but to discern wisely. Prophecy does not call Africa to fear. It calls Africa to prepare. Self-reliance, unity, food security, and moral leadership are Africa's shield. Global wars expose weak systems, not weak people. So I ask you, what should Africa do when giants go to war? Comment below, like this video if it opened your eyes, and subscribe for prophetic insight Africa needs now. We haven't started yet, because what we are going to show you will blow your mind. Why does America and Israel are trying to rush prophecy? And what prophecy is at stake? Stay tuned as we are just getting started.
America and Israel are not simply reacting to events. They are operating from a deep belief that history is moving toward a prophetic climax, and that timing matters. Many leaders within both nations view the Middle East as the stage where biblical prophecies must unfold, especially those connected to Jerusalem, Iran, and global conflict. This mindset creates urgency, an urgency to act, pressure, confront, and sometimes provoke, because prophecy is seen not as something to wait for, but something to accelerate. Passages like Daniel's visions of rising kingdoms, Ezekiel's warnings about alliances in the Middle East, and Revelation's picture of global confrontation are often interpreted as timelines rather than warnings. What is truly taking place is not a rush toward peace, but a rush toward positioning. Military, economic, and spiritual positioning. The danger is that prophecy meant to warn humanity is being treated as a checklist to complete. When nations attempt to force prophetic outcomes, they blur the line between divine timing and human ambition. This does not fulfill prophecy, it tests it. The prophecies at stake are not only about war, but about deception, pride, and the fall of great powers. History shows that when leaders believe they are fulfilling destiny, they stop questioning consequences. And that is when prophecy stops being a warning and becomes a mirror.
Here is what most people miss. True prophecy is not about destruction, but about realignment. The wars, tensions, and global shaking are not meant to glorify violence. They are meant to awaken God's scattered people and call them back to truth, identity, and purpose. Scripture shows that before restoration, there is always exposure. Before return, there is always shaking. Russia and China are not entering this conflict out of chaos, but out of positioning, economic, territorial, and prophetic positioning described long before modern politics. These powers challenge Western dominance, not just militarily, but spiritually, by breaking systems built on deception and imbalance. Africa's role is critical here, because Africa holds both ancient faith and future potential. Its awakening threatens systems that profit from ignorance and dependency. This is why the pressure is rushing, because awakening cannot be delayed forever. War accelerates what comfort suppresses. The return God desires is not geographical alone, but spiritual, back to truth, justice, and identity. The conflict is not about nations winning, but about people waking up. And history rushes when awakening becomes inevitable.
This is where it all collapses. When human ambition tries to hijack divine prophecy, it only exposes its own limits. Prophecy does not belong to nations, leaders, or military power. It belongs to God's timing alone. History shows that whenever empires believed they could control destiny, they accelerated their own fall instead. What man attempts to rush, God allows to unravel. Prophecy does not need human force to come to pass. It unfolds through consequence, not manipulation. Wars started to fulfill prophecy, often end up fulfilling judgment instead. The more leaders try to steer outcomes, the more uncontrollable events become. This collapse is not sudden. It is the final breaking of illusion, pride, and false certainty. Systems fail when they assume they are chosen rather than accountable. In the end, prophecy arrives untouched by human schemes. And when it does, it reveals who trusted power and who trusted truth.
What happens next is shocking, because an attack on Iran would not remain a single event. It would trigger a global chain reaction. Oil prices would surge overnight, collapsing fragile economies and pushing millions into hardship, especially across Africa, where fuel and food imports dominate daily survival. Trade routes would destabilize, currencies would weaken, and inflation would spread faster than governments can respond. Iran would not fight alone. Alliances would activate, cyber warfare would intensify, and global markets would shake. Africa would feel the pain without firing a single shot, through rising costs, political pressure, and renewed dependency. Nations claiming neutrality would still be forced to choose sides economically. This is how modern wars spread, silently, financially, relentlessly. The consequences would last far longer than the conflict itself. Africa's greatest danger would not be war, but unpreparedness. Now is the time to wake up, think independently, prepare wisely, and refuse to be passive spectators, because what comes next will shape generations.